Welcome back. Thanks for joining me in the next episode of our legacy auto conversion to HTML and CSS. So today we're going to get into a little bit of coding, nothing too heavy. I did shortchange you on the setup episode. I forgot a couple things. One is a color picker. You can choose whatever you like. I'm just happen to be using this one by addcreative.ai. But there's a whole bunch. You can go to Chrome Web Store and Google Color Picker or Eyedropper, and you'll see a whole bunch of free extensions you can install in your browser. Mozilla Web Store has the same, has a bunch as well. So you can find anyone you want. Basically, what this is going to do is it's going to let us choose our colors. Now I've already pre-selected by going in here. But for example, so we're saying click to select, so you click I, and now I can go in here and I can hover over the image. And so what this is going to do is it's going to let me pick what the colors are for certain areas, right? So if I want to know what color the sun is or what color these sun rays are, I can use this color picker. So that's one thing that I missed in the setup you'll need. So you can go ahead and do that now. All right, and then a quick note on what these things are. So I didn't really cover this in the last episode, but HTML is essentially a structural language where to render things. It's not content, but it's the structure around the content. CSS style sheet explains how to render that content. So how it's going to look, feel, be styled. So let's dive in. And what I want to do here is I am going to start with just the basics. So in HTML, there are a couple of foundational elements to the page. One is the actual HTML tag itself. The other one's body. So typically, and so this editor is doing autocomplete for me, which is nice, saves me some typing. In the HTML tag, you want to define things like your font family, the font size, and whatever you define here will cascade to everything else in your page unless you override it later. So I'm just going to go ahead and set a default font size of 14 pixels, sans serif because I like that better. And here, if you don't define explicitly that you don't want margin or border or padding, sometimes you get some unexpected results in your browser, and that's not so good. All right, so for the body, I'm going to just give it a background color of white. I'm going to say text align center, and then that's pretty good for now. Now in the index file, again, autocomplete here. So this doc type definition tells the browser for rendering HTML, and it tells it how to parse the content of this document. So that's where we'll start. Now, inside of here, we're going to have head tag, and this is where we'll have our title or link to external style sheets, etc. And then we're going to have our body. And this is where the content will go. So I'm going to pre-fill that. And so let's open this in our browser now. And I'm just going to, there we go. Okay, so I'm seeing what I wrote. So that's great. And I'm going to go back. All right, but you can see this text is not sans serif, right? It's serif font, which we don't want. And it's also left aligned, which we don't want either. So now, what we need to do is come back and import this into our HTML. So let's do a link. href attribute tells it where to look it up. So we will look in styles, and then We're going to look for car poster. Now the fact that it's doing autocomplete tells me that it's actually finding the style sheet, which is great. So it gives me confidence that my pathing is correct. And I'm just going to tell it style sheet and then type text CSS. So, and okay, so a couple things here. Let's break this down. This link property is how you import an external style sheet. href, again, this is the relative path. This dot right here references the current directory. So if I collapse these, you can see the current directory that I'm in is auto HTML conversion. So that's the dot. And then slash is telling it to navigate from the current directory into a directory called styles, which is this one. And then inside of styles, again, navigate with that / and then find this asset here, car poster styles.css. And the type argument you should always include for CSS. It just tells what type of content is inside the file. And this little / caret link elements are self-terminating. So in other words, you don't need this kind of closing tag for a link. So just this is fine. All right, so let's save that. We'll refresh here, and there we go. So now we have centered content, and it is sans serif text. So we're good there. And now, so let's take a look at this image for a minute. So like I said, HTML is structural. And if I look at this, I can see there's kind of a wood sort of texture panel background. And then this sort of poster seems to be floating on top of it with a little bit of shadow around it. So one thing about HTML, you can stack things. It uses a property called z-index, and you can think of it as like a birthday cake in layers. And so you can stack things on top of each other. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking here is I'm going to take a little snippet of this wood texture, wood grain, and I'm just gonna copy it with a screenshot, and then I'm going to, sorry, I have a third desktop open and it's confusing me. All right, found it, and I'm just gonna move it to my images directory. There it is, it's called wood-texture. And so I'm actually going to use that as the background for the body. So I'm just going to say, actually, I can just modify the existing class here. URL, we'll say wood texture. And I'm going to tell it where to position it. I want it center and top. So that is side to side. The first argument is side to side, the X value. So center, side to side, and then top would be the Y value. So top to bottom. So that's what I want. And then I'm going to tell it to repeat Y. So what this means is along the long axis here of the browser, top to bottom, it'll repeat, it'll tile from top to bottom. But side to side is not going to repeat. I got double rows, I don't need that. And then I'm just gonna save that and refresh. And I'm not seeing anything. So let me just do a quick debug here. And this inspector is going to be one of your favorite friends. And if I hover over this path here, it's showing me the styles, so the body, so the background. It's telling me it could not load the image. So that tells me that my pathing is not correct. And if I look at it, they're right, it's not. So I am inside the styles directory. And the image directory where the image is at the same level as the styles directory. So what I need to do is come outside of styles, go back into images, and go get that wood. So I'm going to do double dot, which means leave the current directory and go out to images and then get that wood texture. And let's see if this fixes it. Okay. Wow. All right, that's, yeah, great. Now, we'll just let it tile. So the last thing we're going to try to accomplish today is the actual poster body, this white rectangle. We are gonna add an ID here. So this hashtag in CSS means ID, and the nice thing about that, it means you can only have one per page. So they're usually reserved for the primary elements of the page. And this one's the primary wrapper. So I'm going to use an ID and I'm going to say poster. And so for this, I need a width, and I'm really just going to guesstimate it. So I'm going to say 600 pixels, and the height, I'm going to go with 800 pixels. Background is white. And then I need position relative. So this is critical. If you're going to have other elements inside of this poster that you want to locate relative to the outside of this poster, you need this position relative. That sort of sets this wrapper up as a marker. And then later, if I do an absolute position for the sun or the rays or these ground elements, they will be absolutely positioned to the outside of this poster and not to the browser window. And that's a huge difference, because if they're positioned relative to the browser window, and I say left 0, instead of starting here at the edge of the poster, they're going to start over here at the edge of the browser. So I need position relative. So I'm going to save the poster class, and then let's say poster. All right. I'm going to erase our placeholder text. Also, it's always a good idea when you're writing HTML or coding in any language, follow the indentation recommendations of that language. It's easier to read, easier to debug. So there's our poster want. Now, one thing we can do in the browser itself is we can do a lot of editing of styles right here. And then once we have them tweaked to the way we want, we can go back and update our style sheet accordingly, rather than going back and forth from browser to style sheet, browser to style sheet. We can just do it all here. So let's say margin top, looks like there's a top margin on this thing, so let's give it like 50 pixels, and then auto. We have text align center. So, all right, I can sort that out. But at least for now, I know the top margin's working, the poster's there. And then the last thing I wanted to add here is it looks like there's a shadow going around this. So let's add that shadow, and that one will be a box shadow property. Again, I'm just kind of guesstimating here. I'm going to say 0, 6 pixels, 12 pixels, and I'll go 15, do 75% opacity. So box shadow, again, this is just from years of having done this. I'm just kind of guessing according to what it looks like to me. It's looking pretty good. So I can see the shadow there. It's not overwhelming, but I can see it. And all this is saying is your X value, your Y value, and then the spread of the box shadow, how far you want it to come away from the image. And then RGBA, I'm using alpha colors here because I want to do some opacity. So again, our RGB refers to that. There's 3 primary colors, red, green, blue. And this is the palette that all web graphics use, not the 4-color CMYK from printing process. So here, R is red, G is green, B is blue, 0 is straight across, that means solid black. And A is the alpha channel, which tells the opacity. So I'm telling it, make it 75% opacity, so it's a little bit lighter. I don't want solid black. All right, and that is a wrap. We'll hold it there, and in our next episode, I want to dig into, I think we'll tackle the sun first, because it's kind of central and it will be a good anchor point once we get that placed correctly, then it'll be easier to do these rays coming off of it. All right, thanks so much for joining. See you next time.